Hi there. Welcome to History Chats. If you've been watching over the last couple weeks, you know the drill. We're doing some reruns. So Gary and I, we've been doing this for almost 3 years now, and we decided to take a month off from doing brand new programming. But I wanted to give a little bit of explanation, not just, here's an old program, but also to give it some explanation of, what do we do, and, maybe some behind the scenes of why we decide to do what we do. So today, I thought we'd look back on one of the guest programs, guest presentations that we've had. We've done a few of these over the years. Some of them are from outside of our institution. Some of them are from inside, and this is an example of the latter. This is Martina Kostreva's program on LogJam that she did back in December of 2021. LogJam, well, she'll get into it, get into the program, but that was the Historical Society put that on for many years as a showcase of bringing history to life, as sort of a festival thing here in Wausau, with music and food and, all sorts of stuff, reenacting. Yeah, so that was a great collection. And of course, it's a great collection to kind of focus as well, because not only do we have the story of LogJam, but also the physical things in our archives. And so I thought, as Martina was just getting kind of familiar with the archival collections that we had, as the archival assistant that she worked here, and I thought it would be kind of a good opportunity to kind of get familiar with the story and tell an interesting story as well. It's always interesting. One of the reasons that Gary and I do this is, we've been doing it for so long, that there's this sort of formulaic thing. Like, I know what makes sense to tell a story. And Gary has a different take on how he puts together and kind of thinks about doing a program like this as well. And it's always interesting to see other people's takes on it too. And then it also allows us to kind of, get a little bit of a breather and focus on the next one too, of having somebody else kind of sharing the load of getting other people involved. And also, just great spotlight, and we have a lot of very talented, very passionate people here working at the Historical Society and volunteering and being involved, and the more that we can kind of showcase that, and it's not just Gary and I that do all of the work. We definitely benefit from a large group of people that have made it possible for us to do these programs every week. So wanted to showcase that, and I think Martinez did a great job of showcasing the history of LogJam and telling a great story. She not only went and pulled the photographs and records from our archives, she also went above and beyond and did some interviews with some of the individuals who were involved over the years to get a better sense of how things came out. I think it was a great program that maybe didn't get as much views as perhaps it deserved. So I figured, hey, if you missed it, here it is again. I hope you enjoy Martina's program on LogJam. So today, as I said, we're going to talk about LogJam. Let me see, get the right, here we go. And we're going to be joined by Martina, who's going to be taking us through the story. So take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining in today's chat. My name is Martina Kostreva. I am the assistant archivist here at the Historical Society, and I'm going to be telling you about the Great Wisconsin River LogJam that was hosted by the Historical Society. So for those of you who may be wondering what LogJam was, it was a living history festival, and again, it was put on by the Marathon County Historical Society in the 80s into the 90s. So about 10 plus years. And during that time, it was the body of the Historical Society. It was what the Historical Society was known for because it was a very big event. So the title, LogJam, was created by Carrie von Netschen, I hope I pronounced that correctly, at a brainstorm session in the museum library. And when I say museum library, I'm not talking about the one at the Woodson House. I'm actually talking about the one that would have been at the Yawkey House. So before the Historical Society was where it is now at the Woodson House, everything was over at the Yawkey House. So the museum and library, I think we're all on the second and third floors. So a little different from what we're used to today. LogJam became a major event that attracted a lot of people. The goal wasn't about money. It was about education and fun and learning about various ethnicities that make up Wausau. And before we get started, I just want to give a shout out, a thank you to Tom Schleif, who was the museum director during LogJam, and he was the creator of LogJam. And Brian Williams, he was a planner for LogJam, and he helped with the setup, and he was also a reenactor. And then Kathy Volkman, she was the head volunteer during LogJam, and she ran the museum's food stand. And today she's our collections curator. So just a thank you to them for speaking with me and giving me some really good stories and some really good information. Here I have an article from the Wausau Daily Herald, June 2nd, 1991. So this is kind of in the middle of when LogJam was popular. I wanted to use this because it has a great photo of Tom, and it speaks about how successful Tom was during the event. He was a reenactor and a musician, so that is how he kind of created contacts for the reenactors and musicians who attended the festival from attending other festivals in Milwaukee. And he also helped start Blues Fest and Live at the Blues Cafe in Wausau. So this article mentions that Tom likes theme parties, and he has gotten pretty good at throwing them. And it mentions that 25,000 people showed up for the previous LogJam in 1990, which was a really great turnout. Also, Tom's goal for the Historical Society was to get the public involved. That was the reason he created LogJam, is to get people more involved with history in the community. So before it became known as the official LogJam, the early festivals were actually referred to as Living History Festivals, or this one was called Lure of Lumber, and this one happened in 1987. So the year prior to the first official LogJam that would take place at Oakenfern Islands. It had a lot of the same things as the big LogJam would have, just on a little bit of a smaller scale. So they had opening ceremonies, they had the ethnic foods, ethnic groups, crafts, and demonstrations. And I just want to point out here on this brochure that I have on the screen that under Saturday at 11 a.m., they had trial and punishment public flogging. So I think that's a pretty interesting event to have. I'm not sure if it was at the official big LogJams, but I just wanted to point it out because it's kind of unique. And here I'm going to show you some of the early festival photos that took place on the Yaqui House grounds. We can see here that this is what looks to be like the Native American dancers and music group performing in the formal gardens. So I think it's just a good representation of what the smaller festivals looked like. And I just want to point out the fountain here. Now we have a fountain in the middle, and here they have it taken out. So I'm not sure why that was like that. And then on the picture on the right is of a teepee on the front lawn in front of the Yaqui House. And some more photos. The picture on the top left is of a man who he was referred to as Whip, and he would perform bullwhip tricks with people. And the second photo is of a fur trade encampment, showing an example of what that lifestyle would have looked like. Also, many of the volunteers that were at the early festivals would also work at the official event too. Here we have an amateur lumberjack competition. He's throwing, it looks like he's practicing axe throwing, and then just the second photos of some reenactors. And I really like this photo. I think it captures the reenactors' costumes very well. And here I have an article from, again, the Wausau Daily Herald, January 10th, 1988. So this is an announcement of the first LogJam, and we can see that it was already expected to be a pretty large event early on. It reads that last year's Lure of Lumber event attracted more than 2,500 visitors, Schleif thinks that a river event, emphasizing the ethnic history of the area, will attract many thousands more, and he was very right. So again, if I haven't mentioned it, the official LogJam was held over on Fern and Oak Island parks. And here we're gonna get right into the official LogJam. So here's a photo of the opening ceremony. So I talked to Brian Williams more about the opening ceremony because I wasn't clear on what exactly took place during that event. And he said that in the morning, all the various groups would form up and march to the demonstration area. These would include Rogers Rangers, the British Colonials, Civil War reenactors, French Marines, etc. Once they were all assembled according to their groups, the narrator, Jim Hawkins, would start reading a speech, and the speech would mention each group individually and the impact that they had on Wisconsin history. And as they were announced, they would enter into the demonstration area. And at the end of the speech, every group would shoot a volley in the air, and then LogJam would be officially started. And I have a couple photos of examples of groups entering into the grounds. So here's one. And the next one, some Scotsmen. And if you look in the background, we can see some buckskinners, fur traders entering also. So how this was laid out on the grounds, each group was kind of sectioned off on their own. So we had the Native Americans, the teepees, then we had the fur traders, the Civil War camp. It was all kind of divided into their own areas. So here we have the Native American village. So if you remember the early photo of the festival of just the one teepee on the Yaqui House grounds, now we have an entire village of teepees. Kathy mentioned that in the morning you could see smoke rising out from the tops of the teepees, and she said that was a pretty neat sight. And I just want to talk about the setup and the equipment. So this was all done by volunteers. The Carpenters Union helped with the setup, and again, they did this all for free. And then the volunteers from the museum. So a lot of hard work. And it took 2 semis to hold all of the equipment for LogJam. 2 semi-trailers. So beer garden fencing, crafters tents, the front gates for the grounds. It was all in semi-trailers. So a lot of work. And then here's an example of the Native American dancers entering onto the grounds during the opening ceremony. And then fur traders. Here's a picture of a buckskinner or a fur trader. I kind of had a hard time finding good photos for an example of the fur trade encampment. This is the best one I could find. And I think it would be a really good photo, except for the fact that he's holding a camera. So it takes away of the realness of the photo, but I still like it. And then our Civil War camp. There were over 100 campsites in the Civil War camp. So again, a lot of setup, a lot of preparations to get that all ready, and a lot of reenactors. Apparently they had a horse. And then this is a photo from LogJam of '96. I just want to note that there's a child in the photo and then a Scottish man. So I don't know how exactly he fits in to that Civil War camp, but he's there. And another note, we do have this cannon in our collections, and it does work. Here's a picture of the Revolutionary War group marching, and I would just like to point out the women in the background are also an appropriate time era attire. And one more photo of the Revolutionary War men. This is one from one of the first LogJams, so either 88 or 89. And then the logging and steam engine area. So featured here were the steam tractor and the sawmill. So here's a photo of the sawmill. And Kathy talk to me about what that building was being built in the background, and I don't recall what it was, but it's on the islands. And then here we have a photo of the steam tractor. And also in this area we had horses demonstrating skidding logs. And then we have the Shears Lumberjack shows and an amateur lumberjack competition. So the Shears Lumberjack show included log rolling, pole climbing, axe throwing, and chopping, all by professionals. And they're still around in Hayward and Woodruff, Wisconsin, so you can definitely check out their website if you want to see a little bit more about them. And also on Saturdays and Sundays of LogJam, they open with a lumberjack pancake breakfast, which I bet had to be delicious. So here is the Shears Lumberjack men cross cut sawing and pole climbing. And then log rolling. And also on many years of LogJam, it would coincide with the World Cup kayak races. So here are a couple photos of that, which I think are pretty cool shots. And then crafters. There were 30 traditional crafts that were demonstrated, and throughout the years of LogJam, those numbers just continued to grow. I think in later years of LogJam, there were about 50, and I think one year even 70 crafters. And so here we have a stained glass maker, and I'm just going to read from one of the brochures some of the crafters that were there. So there were basket makers, quilters, spinners, weavers, black powder gunsmiths, Native American beadworkers and quill workers, corn husk doll making, rose mauling, Ukrainian egg painting, and German and Polish paper cutting. So here I have a photo of the rose mauler, and I just recently learned what rose mauling is. It's a Norwegian form of art that translates to flower painting, and it's typically painted on wood, and it features delicate flowers and scrolls, and it can be used on walls, chairs, trunks, and anything that needed a little more detail. And then here's a puppeteer stand. Another thing I'd like to mention is that our very own Linda Forbes, our curator of textiles, had a craft stand making rendezvous clothing at the LogJam, so that's how she wound up with us. Polish folk crafts. And one of my favorites, a violin maker. I think that's a pretty neat thing to have there. And then ethnic foods. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any photos of the food stands that were at LogJam, so I kind of improvised and found some pictures of food that would have been similar to what was there. So the ethnic food stands that would have been at LogJam included American Indian, German, Korean, Laotian, Hmong, Scottish, Norwegian, Finnish, Italian, Jewish, Polish, Bulgarian, and Yugoslavian. Another thing, no beer was served at the early events because they wanted to keep it family friendly, but later on, in order to raise some more money, they did start serving beer. And then here's a photo, I believe is the great-grandmother's kitchen. So just an example of what a very early stove would have looked like, kitchen utensils, the women dressed in appropriate attire. And then music and entertainment. Music and entertainment was a huge part of LogJam. And on the first opening weekend of LogJam, they had Judy Collins perform at the Grand Theater Friday night. Others who performed are Peter Ostrowski and the Mando Boys, Claudia Schmidt, Lou and Peter Berryman, Northern Lights, Sparky Rucker, Tom Pease, and many others. later years included the 1st Brigade Band and the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. Music was mostly regionally famous. The blues came out of Chicago and Minneapolis, and then evenings of LogJam started to become more rock and roll. And here's a photo of some ethnic groups performing under the large yellow circus tent. This tent housed the main stage and where the headliners would perform. So some ethnic groups who performed were Native American drum and dancers, the Scottish pipe band, Norwegian dancers, Bulgarian folk ensemble, Hmong musicians and dancers, German dancers, Italian, Polish dancers. So a lot of ethnic groups. Here are a few photos of those groups performing. And the Scottish pipe band. And here I have another article from the Wausau Daily Herald dated June 20th, 1988, and it's discussing the results of the first LogJam. And it was a huge hit. They estimated there to be about 15,000 to 20,000 people at the first LogJam in 1988. The article reads, "We'd be willing to bet there are a lot of bone-tired people in Wausau area today, but we bet their satisfaction in a job well done goes just as deep." And then later years, they approximated there to be about 25,000 to 30,000 people attended, if not more, in some years. And that's because it was an additional summer event other than the fair. Otherwise, during this time period, there weren't a lot of summer things to do in Wausau. And then I just want to include a couple of key things from LogJam. So I have a hand-drawn map of the grounds that I found mixed in with our LogJam collection. And I know it's kind of hard to see, so I blew up the photo and highlighted just the bottom right corner. So you can see that there's a candle maker set up on the left-hand side, and then above that it has Trader's Row. That is where the crafters would have had their tents set up. We can see the demonstration area mapped out here, as well as a little guy in the canoe in the water off to the side. And the notes on the bottom read about notes that things need to be made or what needs to be done. So the fur trade needs a 4x4 sign. The French Marine sign needs to be made. Rogers Rangers sign to be made. So I think it's a good example of just how much detail and planning went into this event. And I think one thing highlighted from the years is Molly and the Haymakers performed in 1996, and they were one of the larger groups to perform at LogJam, and they were very popular at the time. They originated from Hayward, Wisconsin, and their genre varied between country and folk and rock. And they toured across the country as well as Europe, so pretty popular at the time. And then here I have a photo of the bridge connecting the two islands. So flooding of the river happened almost every year prior to setup, which made the whole process a little more difficult for everybody. But specifically in 1990, the river flooded the grounds entirely, and everything had to be moved to where the farmers market is held today. Things were actually washed away down the river, like tents and other equipment, and had to be fished out of the river. So that wasn't the best weekend, but it was still successful. In the 90s, the free trolley and shuttle service was added, and it took people from downtown Wausau parking lots to the LogJam grounds and to the kayak races. And that was a popular thing because traffic to get to LogJam, was told, was terrible. So people really enjoyed this service. And then in 1992, there was a train that gave people rides from Wausau to Merrill and back, and it was a steam locomotive. The engine was Chicago Northwestern number 1385, and it was owned by the Mid-Continent Railway Historic Society of North Freedom, Wisconsin. It held 400 passengers in coach and 56 in first class, and it included a bar and hors d'oeuvres in the dining car. And that weekend was sold out. You had to buy tickets to get onto the train, and it was completely sold out. And then I was told that there was a diesel train that took place, again, giving people rides from Merrill to Wausau in 1994. But it's a little fuzzy if this actually happened or if it was canceled last minute. So I'm just judging from the brochure, it took place. So I'm assuming there was 2 trains. And I was told in one of those years that Tiny Tim, the musician most famous for singing Tiptoe Through the Tulips, actually rode the train to LogJam. And he performed for an hour for free. And the feedback about this was actually really great. I know some people have some mixed feelings about this performer, but he did perform for free, which was great. And he played songs all from memory. And I'm told he wore a white tux with long coattails and he had bright red hair. And here I have another article from the Daily Herald from 2000. This is unfortunately talking about that LogJam was canceled last minute in 2000. It says here that 30,000 deficit in 1999 contributed to cancellation. But there are actually a lot of reasons why LogJam ended. Again, like it does say, money wasn't being made. And tickets were pretty cheap. So around $5 to $6 a ticket. In later years, earlier years, I think they might have been about $3 to $4. So pretty cheap. Music was getting to be pretty expensive, especially performers who performed more towards the night. They were more popular bands, which costed more money. And 3, the weather wasn't always nice. Sometimes it could have been pretty hot, rainy, and like I mentioned earlier, there was flooding. And it just was hard on the people who were doing the setup for them to continue doing it. They were getting tired. 4th reason, they couldn't find anybody to do public relations, and the event needed sponsors to run. There were actually sponsor wars in some years between Coke and Pepsi and some beer companies. And the common thing that I heard from talking to Tom, Brian, and Kathy is that it was so much work. A lot of volunteers, and through the years it just gets harder and harder. And a last reason is because Tom Schleif left for a better job in California, and no one's going to pass up a better job opportunity. So, but in this article, he kind of gets a lot of heat for leaving, and he does write a response to this article, and I just want to read a couple things from that article that Tom wrote. He says, the LogJam Committee, over the last 5 years, has created the LogJam Bible. It is a book that lists every contact, every aspect of what needs to be done to put on LogJam in great detail. And we do have the LogJam Bible here at the Historical Society, and it is full of details, full of the contacts that were needed to put on the event, as well as, like, I found the hand-drawn map in that book. And then he goes on to say, LogJam has not been financially successful the last 2 years. It has been losing attendance the last 3 years. Is the museum supposed to continue doing an event that is no longer successful financially? Events have their lifespan, and I think LogJam may have reached its end. Some new blood, a little break, some new ideas, and who knows, it may be back bigger than ever in a new form. One thing I do know is the community needs to support events by attending them or they will go away. And I think that's a great lesson to learn that it's a good reminder to attend local events. Wausau has so many events, parades, fairs, Chalk Fest, events at the Grand Theater, holidays at the houses we just had at the Historical Society. So if you enjoy events, it's a good thing to remember to attend them. And then lastly, I came across some photos of some fireworks that I'm assuming wrapped up the festival or the kayak races, but I thought it was appropriate to end with these photos. Overall, I think LogJam had a great run of 11 plus years. That's a really long time for an event on the scale that it was on. And museum and historical societies have eras, and their focus is always changing, which isn't a bad thing. Sometimes it just gets better throughout the years. And next week, we're going to see again how even more different the historical society was in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. In that history chat, we're going to learn all about how different it was. And I think that this event, LogJam, was a special one. Talking to those involved, I could sense that it is something that holds a lot of meaning to them, which is understandable with how much blood, sweat, and tears that these people put into this event. And I'm thankful that I got to learn so much about such a unique event. And I'm glad I got to tell you all the story of the Historical Society's Great Wisconsin River LogJam today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Martina. I was thinking, for those of you who are watching, I approached Martina a couple months ago, relatively new member of staff here, and not from Wausau necessarily. So I said, "Hey, do you want to learn LogJam?" And she jumped right in and did a great job of pulling out as much as she could here. So, great job.